Good morning. Happy Mother's Day, right? That's today. I have texted my mom. I will call her after. Okay, all the moms are nodding. Okay. Yeah, no. My mom doesn't have those capabilities. Allegedly. No, I will be calling her. It is Mother's Day. It is also allergy season, so on account of those two things, this probably won't be a very long sermon. My allergies have been eating me alive for the past week or so, actually a little bit longer. I noticed some of you, you're already very moved by my sermon so far. I can see the tears in your eyes. That's what I'm going to tell myself. I'm sure it has nothing to do with all of the pollen that is on the various cars, as well as, all over everything and us. But it's Mother's Day, and so I feel like it is only fitting that we talk about mothers and that I give a very quick little story, so to speak. Several stories, actually, but they can be summarized pretty easily with one story about my mom. Now, as many of you guys know, probably most, if not all of you know, I went to college here in Missouri. Now, as most of you, if not all of you know, I'm not from Missouri. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. And so, what? Okay. I was like, I am from Houston. I don't know if you're questioning that. Maybe I got something wrong. Are we not in Missouri? I don't know. But, no, so, I went to college in Missouri. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. And so I don't know how many of you guys went to college, or have ever been away from your family for an extended point of time, or, went home to see them for various holidays, things like that. You know that there tends to be emotions that arise when you are far from home, right? And so, for the most part, every single holiday that I went to go spend with my family down in Texas, it was something that was going to be temporary. Whether I was home for Thanksgiving for 1 week, home for Christmas for maybe roughly a month, home for even summer, which is, only a handful of months, it was pretty much temporary, right? And so there was coming a day that I was going to have to go back to Missouri and continue schooling. And those days were very tough, right? Many of you kind of know where I'm going with this. So with moms, and especially with sons, this might be, I don't know, maybe I'm overstepping, maybe I'm, over generalizing here, but there's sort of this connection between moms and sons that just you just can't really explain it other than mother-son connections. Like, mothers and daughters and fathers and daughters, they have their own little dynamic that is kind of different from how a mother interacts with their son. Right? And so for the most part, it looks a little different. And so it's very emotional. I don't know why. It is that way, but it just is. Especially when son is leaving, or son has been hurt, or son is in danger. Mama bear comes out a little bit more so than, even with daughter. Sometimes with daughter, it's kind of like, oh, it's going to be okay. With son, it's like, you will not survive. It's kind of that scenario. And so that was the way it was with me and my mom. My mom was very protective of me, but she was also very, sad to see me go. And for the most part with dad, son and dad, it's very much so manly, son, you're going to be okay, don't break down, and if you do, make sure you know how to, fix your car, that kind of stuff. I don't know, that's always the kind of vibe that I got from my dad. I don't know, maybe that was just me, but, my dad was very much so like, son, we hate to see you go, I love you, son, be careful, drive safe, and then, bye. Like quick hug. Yep, cool. All right. And then, like my mom ended up like snitching on my dad a while like afterward and was like, Dad did always stand behind the door and watch you through the window as you pulled out. And it's like, that's kind of dads and sons, right? Like, yeah, super masculine, very stoic. And then like behind closed doors, is he gonna be okay? Like that's kind of it. Moms, no, that's not the way it plays out. With mom, it was always like, I'm hopping in the car, I'm about to drive off, well, I'm about to hop in the car, and mom's like, okay, one more hug. And then like that one more hug turns into like 3 more hugs, and each one is like 30 seconds long, right? And so like, and then like always crying, right? Like always tear-filled. Like, I don't know. Dad, it was very much so like, love you, son, bye. Mom, it's like, I just hate to see you go. Please be safe, And it's like, my mom's going to kill me if she sees this. I don't know. She's going to fly up here and handle that business herself. But that's just kind of the way that it always played out. And so, actually, I'm going to go see her in a few weeks. So she might not even have to come. She might be plotting. I don't know. But there's just that relationship that's there. And when it comes to being a son, there's just nothing that like breaks down that stoic barrier wall like mom crying, right? Like there's just something about that where you're kind of like, oh, like, yeah, like you start to feel it yourself and you're like, Mom, stop crying. Like it's allergy season, like it's that kind of stuff. And there's a TV show that me and my family used to watch that summarizes it really well about mother-son relationships. There's this show that was airing a while back called Burn Notice. I don't know if any of you guys ever watched that show. It's about this guy. He's, Army veteran, war-hardened, and becomes like a CIA spy, and he's like this super spy who can do it all, He's been kidnapped, he's been tortured, he's gone, and he's like, and he's explaining this, and he's like, all of the and then he gets like blacklisted from being a spy, and so he ends up finding himself in his hometown where his mom lives. And so his mom has a friend who has a need that he can really, he has a certain set of skills, right? I forget which spy movie that is, Mission Impossible or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, he has those skills. Yeah. But something, I don't know. I'm not the most masculine guy. I don't know if you guys know that. But, you didn't have to laugh so hard. So he has these skills, and his mom comes to him with a problem that her friend's going through, and he explains it very beautifully. He starts talking, and he's like, all of the military training in the world, being beaten and tortured and enduring all of that and learning how to cope with that can never prepare you for having your mom cry on your shoulder. And I was like, that is very true. Like, there is no preparation and training for that. It's just the kind of thing that happens. And friends, when we look at the Bible, and especially the Old Testament, but even into the New Testament, we see that dynamic play out a lot with people of God. We see that a lot. So Moses, the story of Moses, you have Moses, who is born into Egypt at a time where the Pharaoh is killing all of the firstborn, sons of the Israelites and that kind of stuff. And Moses is born during this time. And his mother has to place her brand new baby boy into a basket and send it upstream. And, what is the older daughter tasked with? Like, hey, follow that baby. Make sure nothing happens. Like, there's probably no tears being spilled over, like, the dangerous journey of the daughter to make sure she's not caught or whatever. Like, just look out for my baby boy. Like, that's That's the task that Miriam is given. And so Moses goes upstream, and, Moses finds his way into the hands of the daughter of Pharaoh, right? And so the daughter of Pharaoh catches Miriam, and Miriam has to, come up with the story hey, I noticed you found this baby. I happen to know somebody who would make a really good mother for this baby. And then goes and gets her own mom, Moses' own mom, to come and raise the baby, right? And so you have that kind of scenario. Then you have Mary, right? Like Mary, mother of Jesus. And I know I'm jumping very far, but there's a reason for that. It's because I'm coming back to a different mother. You have Mary, the mother of Jesus. Now think about that kind of a task. Think about that kind of motherhood that you're tasked with. Hey, I know you haven't been married. I know you haven't had relations. Congratulations, you're going to have a baby, and it's going to be the Savior of the world. And you're like, okay. And then you start to hear some of the things that your son, the Savior of the world, is talking about how he's going to be given up, about how he's going to die. Now imagine being Mama Mary, and that's the kind of situation that you're finding yourself in. You're hearing this story that, your son is no longer going to be here, that he's going to be handed over, that he's going to be crucified on a tree, and that 3 days later he's going to raise from the dead, which is something that, is it's a pretty new concept to you. Imagine trying to be a mother processing those feelings. That's got to be pretty tough. Now imagine experiencing and actually witnessing. This is not just a story. Mary witnessed and experienced all of these feelings. And I think that if you've seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, it depicts that motherly reaction pretty well between Mary and what's going on with Jesus. There's another story that I want us to look at. It's found in the Old Testament, and it's in the book of 1 Samuel. Now, in 1 Samuel, we have this mother. Her name's Hannah, and for the most part, she doesn't really play this really huge role throughout the entire biblical narrative, okay? So, it's not like she's going to be this recurring, person who's going to keep popping up and popping up and popping up. But I think that her story depicts godly motherhood, but I would also argue that it depicts godliness for the rest of us very, 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 very well. Now, to give a quick little background of Hannah, our main text is going to be 1 Samuel chapter 2, but before we jump into that, I want to look at her background story. Now, Hannah is married to this guy. His name is Elkanah. Now, Elkanah has another wife whose name kind of sounds like Panini. I don't know. It's Penina, or it's one of those complicated. Let me actually try to read it. I don't know. We're going to give it Penina. Penina. That's her name. Now, Penina has children. She's able to give birth. Hannah, she's barren. She's unable to conceive. This is a pretty similar situation that we find with Joseph's mother, right? If you remember Joseph and later his brother Benjamin, you have one wife, Leah, who's able to have children, and then you have another wife, Rachel, who's unable to have children. And that's another interesting mother-son dynamic. A mother who is unable to have children, who finally finds out that she's able to conceive. God has worked through her, and she's able to have a son. They name him Joseph. And then Joseph's brothers sell Joseph into slavery in Egypt, and then convince her that he's been killed by wild beasts. There's throughout the Bible, there's a lot of mothers who lose their son. And it's really tragic. It's really sad. But we see that God works through these situations. And so Hannah, she's unable to bear children. She's unable to conceive. And Peninnah is kind of gloating, rubs it in her face. I'm able to, have children. Who are you? You're not able to. Why are you Elkanah's favorite? Why would he value you more than he values me? You can't even have a child. I've already given him some. And there are probably other women who are criticizing her as well. During this time, it was not seen as a good thing, which actually today it's still not really seen. Oftentimes we take pity on people who are unable to conceive and have children, and they go through different procedures in order to try to make that happen. But it was very shameful in this culture. And so Hannah feels this very great, overwhelming shame that she's unable to have children. And so she goes before God and she prays. She prays very fervently. She's being as open and honest with God as she possibly can, and she's begging God to grant her a son, that she would just be able to conceive, that she could just bear a son. And she says, God, if you would just do this for me, I promise, I'm making this covenant, I will give him to you. You can have him. There's not going to be a razor that touches his hair. He's all yours. It's this, I'm blanking on the word. It's the similar vow that Samson would have gone through. That Samson's mother placed upon him. Say that again? Yes, thank you. So that's what we're dealing with. And so one of the comical things that ends up happening in this story, just to kind of take a quick break from the drama, something that I just find kind of funny. There's this guy who, sees Hannah. She's in the temple. She's kind of doing her thing. She's praying, being very fervent, praying and just being so open and earnest and honest with God. And Eli, the high priest, sees her praying, but she's not actually saying the words out loud. She's mumbling and moving her mouth, and he thinks that she's drunk. It's just this really wild scenario. I envision it as the way, because this is just the way my brain processes things, is through movies. It's as if this movie scene is playing out, where these people, they're gathering and they're doing something, and the pastor walks by and notices, and they quickly straighten up, and they're like, no, it's a misunderstanding. That's kind of what happens with Eli and Hannah. He's like, look, lady, why don't you dump out the bottle? Why don't you pour out the bottle? Stay away from the alcohol, why are you drunk? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, you've got it all wrong. That's not what's going on, I promise. I'm just pleading and begging God to give me a son. I'm not drinking. I haven't had any wine. I haven't had any beer. I promise I'm just doing my best to, try to be open and honest with God. And I guess Eli, feels kind of bad. And he's like, oh, well, in that case, I hope that God gives you the thing that you have pleaded with him about. And sure enough, God does. Hannah and Elkanah, they get together and she conceives. She becomes pregnant. And she gives birth. And that's where we pick up in our passage for today. I want you to see, the reason that I summarized this a little briefly is, I want you to see how open and honest that Hannah is with God, what she's willing to do, that she's willing to give up her son, to place him in the Lord's service if he would just grant her a son. But next, I want you to see her response. This is 1 Samuel chapter 2. It's verses 1 through 10. It says this, Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is lifted up by the Lord. My mouth boasts over my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. And there is no rock like our God. Do not boast so proudly or let arrogant words come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and actions are weighed by him. The bows of the warrior are broken, but the feeble are clothed with strength. Those who are full hire themselves out for food, but those who are starving hunger no more. The woman who is childless gives birth to 7, but the woman with many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and gives life. He sends some down to Sheol, and he raises others up. The Lord brings poverty and gives wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the trash heap. He seats them with noblemen and gives them a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. He has set the world on them. He guards the steps of his faithful ones, but the wicked perish in darkness. For a person does not prevail by his own strength. Those who oppose the Lord will be shattered. He will thunder in the heavens against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give power to his king. He will lift up the horn of his anointed. I love this response from Hannah. I love this response because it gives this really good model of how our prayers should look. Hannah is one of the best, other than like Jesus, right, because he's Jesus. Hannah's prayer here is one of the best models of how faithful people can pray to the Lord. I want you to think about Jesus' example of the Lord's Prayer. I want you to think about it. Throughout the Lord's Prayer that Jesus gives, that he gives as an example to his disciples, Jesus tells them to be honest and open with God, right? To be honest, to be open. Tell God what you need. He already knows, but tell him. It's okay to ask for your daily bread. Ask for that. Give honor. Revere who God is. Recognize that he is who he is, that he is great, that he is awesome. Recognize that about him. Ask God to give you your daily bread. Ask God to save you from temptation. But always honor God as being holy. Friends, that's what Hannah does, isn't it? Isn't that what Hannah does? The first time as she's in the temple and Eli catches her, she's being open, she's being honest, she's being reverent to who God is. She's asking and she's making covenants with God, and she's just trying to bare her heart and her soul to her Creator. And then when God grants her what she's asked for, she responds with this prayer. This is a prayer of thanksgiving because the situation that she was once in, she's been saved from. God has spared her from the affliction of being barren and allowed her to have a son. And so what does she spend the majority of this prayer doing? She begins to recognize exactly who God is, and essentially she recognizes that God is the one who is in control. That God is the one with a final say. That he elevates those who have humbled themselves. That he takes the poor and places them among the righteous. That he takes those who are barren and allows them to have children. That those who have been afflicted, he has the power and the authority to honor and to exalt. And as Hannah's story continues to play out, we see that Hannah follows through with her covenant. Samuel's born, and kind of in that God-given funny and irony, that the sense of humor that God has, the high priest who was saying like, hey, have you considered, pouring out the bottle? You're drunk. And she's like, no, I'm not. That high priest takes Samuel under his wing. Hannah gives Samuel to Eli. And Samuel starts to learn how to be a priest from the high priest. And then as the story continues, in the way that only God can, Eli, his family falls out of favor with the Lord. His sons, they start to live in wickedness. And Samuel takes over. Man, what a fascinating story. What a fascinating reality. What a fascinating history of a woman's faith. Because that's really what it is. If we're just being honest, it's the faith of a mother that leads to Samuel being eventually elevated to the position of a high priest, to the position of being a prophet of the Lord. And as the story continues, it's Samuel who anoints Saul to become king. And because of Saul's wickedness, David becomes king, and it's Samuel who anoints David. And as the story continues and continues and continues, we get to Jesus, who inherits the throne of David that was anointed by Samuel, who was conceived because of the faithfulness of Hannah. Ladies, and fellas, I guess, but mostly ladies, because it's their day today. Come back next month, you can have yours. Your faith and your faithfulness plays a role in how your children are going to turn out. There's no way around that. Your faith and your faithfulness play a role in how your children turn out. Now, I just want to clarify. I just want to preface this. Make a quick little clarification. That's not to say that individual decisions that they make are a result of you. Okay? People will make their own decisions. Because I know that when I say that, many of you think about some of your children who have maybe gone astray. You think of some of the damaged relationships that you might have with some of them. That's not your fault. But many of you have faithful children. Many of you, you've poured into as much as you possibly can to raise your children in the church. You've done all that you can. And to an extent, it boils down to what they will decide. But you gotta lead them. Right? If you're not bringing them into the church, if you're not raising them in the church, you're waiting for them to find it on their own. And that goes for you fathers as well. But again, your day's next month. Friends, throughout the entire Bible, we see mothers who pour into and invest in their children, who raise them up. We see some who their children go astray, and it's not because they didn't do a good enough job. Think about, real quick, this is going to get kind of crazy. We're going to see how this goes. Think about Judas. Think about Judas. He chose to initially follow Jesus, right? Do you think his mom was just absent in that? And then when Judas decides to betray Jesus, do you think that that's because his parents weren't faithful in trying to raise him well? I would venture to guess probably not. But then think of James and John, who have an overbearing mother who's like, hey, Jesus, you're going to put my kids at your right and your left, right? And he's like, I don't know. You know, some of you moms, you relate to James and John's mom, right? Like, you're like, if anybody's sitting next to Jesus, it's my kid. She raised her children probably almost identically to how Judas was raised. That's just the way that things were back then. We don't know the outcome, right? We've talked about that a little recently, about our stories in our chapters. We don't know the outcome. The only thing you and I can do is be faithful with the time that we have right now. That's what Hannah did, right? Hannah wanted to be faithful with the time that she had. She didn't know the outcome. It's not like God revealed to her what Samuel's entire future was, and that Samuel was going to be the one who anoints David and gets to play a role in the Davidic line of kings and eventually the Messiah. Hannah wasn't told that. Hannah just wanted to have a son and begged God for one and said, if you are faithful to me, I promise I'm going to do my best to be faithful to you. That's what she does. That's what she says. So as soon as Samuel's born, she hands him to Eli. You think Hannah knew how Samuel's life was going to turn out? No. She didn't know the outcome. She took it upon herself to be faithful with what God had given and trusted God with the rest. Friends, that's what I would encourage you to do. Real quick, final story. I know I said this was going to be a fast sermon. My allergies cleared up, so I don't know what you guys expected. God delivered, man. What can I say, I'm just trying to be faithful with, the time that I got right now. One quick final story. It's a conversation that me and my mom had a while back. When I decided to go to Bible college and, cause her all of the crying that we had every single holiday that I went home. She pretty much told me then something along the lines of, I knew that God gave you to me, but I knew that I was supposed to give you back. I knew that I couldn't hold on to you, that although you were mine, you were never truly mine, you were always his. Mothers, that's the same for your children. That should be every mother's mindset. And I know that that's really hard. I know that that's way easier said than done. To be willing to let go. But friends, that's part of being faithful. Isn't it? Isn't that part of being faithful just as a whole with anything. Not just your children, but with anything. The ability to let go of your control and say, God, this is yours. Do with it how you will. Whether it's your children or your finances or your job or your house or any other matter in your life, the ability to let go of that control and be honest and give it to God and say, God, do what you will. That's what we're supposed to do with our whole lives, is to entrust it to the God who judges justly. My point that I want to make for the sermon is this. If we can go ahead and put it up. Be open, be honest, and be faithful. Be open, be honest, and be faithful. There is nothing wrong with going to the Lord about your desires, about your wants, about your needs. It's okay to be open and honest with God. He knows your heart. He already knows that you have those things in mind before you even go to Him. Be open, be honest, but when He responds, be faithful. And that's hard to do, isn't it? Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes with certain smaller things, it's like, oh, I'll be faithful with this. But then when the big storms roll in, being faithful becomes a whole lot more challenging. But my encouragement to you is still the same. I don't know what stage you're in your life. I don't know what you need to be honest and open to God about is. Some of you, it's family stuff. Some of you, it's children or spouses or whatever it may be, grandchildren who you've seen that their life just isn't following the path of Christ. Be open and honest about that. God knows. It's okay to ask and beg that God corrects. I think sometimes, especially in the United States, and really just kind of cultures as a whole, if we're just being honest, the concept of begging is really damaging to our pride. We think like there's just nothing that we need that badly. Friends, you need God that badly. I'm just going to throw that out there. You might not need money that badly. You might not need some kind of help to lift something that badly. But when it comes to the weight of sin, when it comes to salvation, you need Him that badly. Your children need Him that badly. Your grandchildren need Him that badly. And there is nothing wrong with going before the Lord and being on your hands and your knees and crying and weeping and being completely open, being completely transparent, 100% honest with God, and begging and asking that God would step in and intervene in the life of your children and your grandchildren because they need Him that badly. There is nothing wrong with that. But are you ready for God's response? In all things, not just salvation issues. There is nothing wrong with going before the Lord and saying, God, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet this month. God, I need you to step in. I'm begging you to save me from whatever this situation is. There's nothing wrong with that. But are you prepared for His response? Because it might be yes, it might be no. We don't actually know this from the text, but I would likely guess that when Hannah was doing this and praying for her to conceive a son, I think she was willing to still stay faithful even if the answer was no. We don't really get to see that because God's answer was yes. But we do see it with Jesus, don't we? What it looks like to get a no answer and still be faithful anyway. I don't think Jesus was wrong to ask God the Father to take the cup of suffering that was placed before him. I don't think there was anything wrong with that, because if there was, well, Jesus wouldn't be perfect, and therefore Jesus wouldn't be Jesus. But he was ready for a no answer. And he was still willing to be faithful even if the answer was no. So friends, be open, be honest, and be faithful. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day that you've given us. God, I thank you for mothers, and I thank you for the role that they play in our lives. God, I pray for the mothers here. I pray for the grandmothers here. I pray for everybody here. God, I pray that we would just be able to be open, to be honest, but ultimately to be faithful. God, there's a lot of needs, there's a lot of wants and a lot of desires. God, I pray that we would just have the heart and the humility to be honest and even to beg and plead for those things. Because God, you're worth begging from. God, whether it's salvation or anything else, God, ultimately, everything is in your hands and in your power. Whether it's given or withheld falls down to you. God, I pray that we would be able to be faithful with that. That we would be willing to accept whatever your answer might be. God, we love you and we thank you, and it's the name of your Son, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. As per usual, this will be the time of invitation. If you have any prayer requests, any praises that you would like to lift up, any decisions that you would like to make, this will be the time to do so as we have our final song.